Let's go ahead and transition to the Cowboys' division rival, the Eagles. It seemed like last year they were loaded with weapons with Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Nelson Aguilar. There's a lot of hype around J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now we're looking at the Eagles like, man, they need weapons. We all saw what happened to them at the end of last season. Their top two receivers this year were tight ends. And they were just hurting on the offensive side of the ball. Carson Wentz absolutely was putting the team on his back. So, Steph, they've got Alshon Jeffrey right now, who's got a lot of trade rumors around him. He actually has close to a $16 million cap hit for 2020. They got Deshaun Jackson, who missed most of the season, Nelson Aguilar, who's a free agent now, and then J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Greg Ward, who actually stepped in pretty well there towards the end of last season. They have $43 million in cap space, and they have a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick towards the back middle of each of those rounds. So, Steph, tell me, what do you think the Eagles do? What's their best plan of attack going into the offseason?
If I'm them, I'm trading Alshon, and it seems like Alshon doesn't want to be there anymore either, just based on the trade rumors that we've heard so far. I love a guy like Henry Ruggs. If Deshaun Jackson leaves, retires, gets cut, I don't know what his situation is. I need to dig into that a little bit more. I know Nelson Aguilar is a free agent. I'm not sure if they resign him. There's a lot of interesting turnover that could happen in the Eagles wide receiving core. I like a Henry. I said the Henry Ruggs pick. I also like a CeeDee Lamb pick. Maybe if they get him at the 21st overall pick, maybe he falls a little bit in that first round. I think he could be a great pickup for them. They need one of these big guys. I don't know if at 19th on that leaderboard in cap space, there's $43 million, and they need to re-sign some guys as well. I don't know if they have the ability to go get a big name. Maybe they get more of a low-key name like Alan Lazard, a guy like that who could come in, maybe fill in for Jeffrey, and just in terms of the physique and the fit and the scheme. I'm not comping those two, but yeah, this one's pretty puzzling to me. I don't see a clear direction that they could take.
Yeah, it's tricky. There's so many moving parts, and we saw those moving parts last season with each week. It seemed like you jumble up the group and pick three of them out of a hat, and that's who's out on the field. So $43 million of cap space. We talked about Alshon Jeffrey's cap hit. If they're able to find a trade suitor for Alshon and clear that, I think it's $16 million off of their books, they're in play for another one of these top receivers. They shed Alshon, and they're in play for Amari Cooper. They're in play for guys like A.J. Green. And interestingly enough, they've been linked to Amari Cooper in a lot of the press that I've read. A lot of people think if Amari leaves Dallas, he's going to want to go play with another good, young, mobile quarterback. When you think about it, Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott have very similar skill sets. He's going to be the clear-cut number one there. They're always a contender, and they might pay him the money that he wants that the Cowboys might not be able to do. So that's really interesting, but I love what you said about the draft. I love those names you threw out. I think if CeeDee Lamb falls to them, that would be an absolute steal for Philadelphia. But I think they might address it in two ways. I think similar to the Colts, they might kind of overkill it at the receiver spot. They might see what happened last season and be like, we do not want this happening again. But one last name I want to throw out for Philly that I think is actually a really good fit is Robbie Anderson. And again, he's kind of similar to the role that Deshaun Jackson holds, but I don't really know what Deshaun Jackson's situation is. He was hurt most of last season. It feels like he's going to be back, but I don't know if they really trust that at this point, or maybe they want a younger guy to go alongside him, get both of the burners on the outsides. But Robbie Anderson, to me, makes a lot of sense. You get him on the outside. You got Ertz and Goddard underneath. That could be a really, really good core there. And really open up some things for the passing game at multiple levels. It could open up things for Miles Sanders on the ground. So I'd keep an eye on Robbie Anderson. I think I'd like to see him stay in green, but this time in Eagles green.
Deshaun Jackson is 33 years old, coming off I believe a abdominal injury, which something like that, part of your core, that affects all facets of your game. In his prime, D-Jax was running 4.3 40s. I don't know if he's still at that level, and that's his main utility. So I could see them easily stepping away from him. We might have all brand new names, at least at the 1 and 2 wide receiver spot for the Eagles. Let's go ahead and move on here to the Packers. This is another one where, hey, we got our stalwart 1. Now we need to fill in that 2 spot. So we have, of course, Devontae Adams there. And then from there we have Geronimo Allison, who's a free agent. Not sure if they're going to resign him. We have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's still there. We have Alan Lazard that we just mentioned. He's a free agent. I think another team would be interested enough to sign him. They have the 25th most cap space, so not a ton to work with, only $20 million. A lot of people saying A.J. Green would be a good fit in that offense. I tend to agree. Put him on the other side of Adams, and that's a lot of weapons for Rodgers to work with. They also have a first, second, and third round pick, all at the 30th spot, so very late. There's some interesting draft names here, but Alex, what's your take on the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the A.J. Green takes, just given the $21 million of cap space and the minimal draft capital. I mean, it's the 30th pick in each round. That's just not a lot to be able to go out and bring in a guy like A.J. Green. Like, if they want to go sign A.J. Green, they're going to have to pretty much blow all of their cap, and they're going to be really constricted elsewhere. So maybe they get creative and clear some cap space and find a way to go get A.J. Green. That would obviously be incredible to see Aaron Rodgers have, Devontae Adams on one side and A.J. on the other, but I actually think they go out and sign one of the lesser expensive free agents. They've tried the young guys over the past couple years at the wide receiver 2 spot, like Geronimo Allison didn't really work out. MVS didn't really work out. So I don't necessarily think they want to go to the draft for a receiver at this point, because at the 130 spot, I don't think they take a receiver. And if you're waiting until 230 or 330, like, there's some talent there. We saw Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel break out after being second and third round picks in their rookie season this past year, but like, they can't really count on that, and it's burned them over the past few seasons. So I actually really think they like Alan Lazard a lot, and I don't think they want him to be their wide receiver 2, but I think there's a good chance they bring him back on a small deal to be their wide receiver 3. And I think they could go out and get a guy we talked about a little earlier, Emmanuel Sanders. To me, makes a lot of sense. He's not going to cost you what A.J. Green's going to cost you. But you think about his play style opposite of Devontae Adams, and it could really make a lot of sense. He's a great route runner. He's quick. He can run a lot of underneath stuff. So he's a veteran. He's a leader as well. So maybe, they pick a guy in round 2 or round 3 in the draft and pair him with Emmanuel Sanders. Maybe they sign Emmanuel Sanders and sign Alan Lazard and have him kind of try to mentor and coach up. Have Sanders coach up Lazard over the next couple years. But that's something that makes sense to me. Obviously, if Randall Cobb hits the open market, there's always going to be a connection there with Green Bay. And then another guy we haven't really talked about is Philip Dorsett. He showed some flashes with New England these past couple seasons, and he was a number 1 pick just a few years ago. So maybe they, roll the dice on a guy like Philip Dorsett and see what he can do. But I think maybe they bring in a couple of these guys. Maybe they sign Lazard and Dorsett. Maybe they pair Lazard with a more established guy like Emmanuel Sanders. But I think it's going to kind of be a committee approach. I don't know that they're going to be able to go get a stud.
Yeah, I love, you named Philip Dorsett. That's a great tier for, I feel like, where they're going to go. Another name that's kind of in that range would be like Taylor Gabriel. He's had some, shown explosiveness at times, shows that he can fit into, some different offenses, being on the Falcons and then the Bears. I love the idea of them taking the best wide receiver that falls to them late in the first or late in the second if there's still some decent names still out there. So look for a guy like maybe T. Higgins out of Clemson, Justin Jefferson out of LSU. I think Justin Jefferson would be a great fit as a wide receiver too. If the passing volume were to increase, I think it will. And to your point, Alan Lazard was actually a relatively decent fantasy option. It's kind of like a low-end handcuff for Devontae Adams when he went out for about 5 weeks. I was plugging him into some lineups. It was pretty gross. But let's go ahead and move on here. Alex, take it away for the Broncos.
It's funny. I was looking at this Broncos situation, and I'm just like, how have they gone this far without more wide receiver depth on their roster? To me, it baffles me. They got Cortland Sutton as the clear one. He's the future. He's a stud. And then you got Deshaun Hamilton, who could be a good slot guy, kind of a catch guy, a yards after catch guy. And then it's Tim Patrick. So you're really thin there. You got nothing. And they got Drew Lock at quarterback. This is a guy who they clearly trust. I mean, he came on strong there at the end of last season, and it's a guy they want to, see if he can go out there and get it done. They want to take their chances with Drew Lock and see what he can do, and they're not really setting him up very fairly if they're rolling him out there with Tim Patrick split out on 75% of snaps. So for me, they need another wide receiver, especially with that quarterback situation. And I know they got Noah Fant, and we've talked about it before. I think he takes a huge step forward this year. He's a good yards after catch guy. He's really explosive. He's got great measurables. So Fant will help for sure, especially with some underneath stuff. But they've got to sign somebody. There's a lot of names that make sense for Denver for me. They got $52 million in cap space, so I think they could get a Robbie Anderson. I think they could get a Brashad Perriman would be really interesting. Take a chance on a guy like that. Someone who doesn't have to be the one. I think they do trust Sutton to be the one. But one of these young guys with some upside to come in and be the two, be the field stretcher. And then some guys in the draft make sense for me on day two. Guys like Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins. I know we just talked about them, but it's a deep class, and there's going to be some value at wide receiver later on. So I think they could snag one of those guys and have that young core of a young rookie, and that's a day two pick that's got a lot of potential. Cortland Sutton on the other side, Noah Fant at tight end, and Drew Lock at quarterback with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman at running back. That's a really strong nucleus at your skill positions, and I think it makes a lot of sense for them moving forward. For me, it doesn't make sense for them to go get one of these big-name free agents because I don't think they're really contenders right now. Maybe if somehow Amari Cooper wanted to go to Denver, I don't see that happening. Like, they could, put together some logic to why that would make sense. He's still only 26 years old, but to me, the much more likely situation is to go young. You could go a little cheaper if it's a free agent and try to build that nucleus around Drew Lock. What do you think, Steph?
Yeah, I'm with you. There's some interesting names in terms of the draft. They're talking about the draft capital. They have the 15th overall pick. They have the 14th pick in the second round, and then they have 3 third-round picks, so they could easily grab a guy on day 3. And one of my guys, if we're looking at names coming out of college this year, is Jalen Reagor. He is being totally slept on.
Beast.
He's out of TCU. He's an absolute machine. Beast. And I'm very excited for this guy. I think he'd be a great fit for the Broncos there. He can help as a field stretcher opposite of Cortland Sutton. They'll give Locke. Locke will have his time to prove it. They're going to put their weapons around him. And, you mentioned Fant. I think he's going to have a huge breakout in 2020. And, that takes some of the pressure off whatever rookie that they're going to bring in, give him some time to learn the system and mesh with Drew Lock. I love Jalen Reagor there. I also love Henry Ruggs. I know it's a guy we keep bringing up, but he could be the next Tyreek Hill, man. Like, I'm pretty pumped to watch Ruggs and see where he goes. He could be huge for any offense. They could use his skill set.